And welcome everyone. Let me know in the chat room you can see me and hear me okay. Move a few things out of the way. And we are going to jump into a very packed live stream this evening. We have a lot to cover. So let me know in the chat room we're good to go. Thank you, PS. Welcome, PS. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. Tonight we're going to talk at the beginning about a marvelous bit of reporting by Dutch Sense on YouTube. Directed energy weapon. Quite compelling. I'm going to go right back to the scripture page here. Forget about that one. That's the wrong. There we go. This is from Dutch's YouTube channel. Screen capture. Directed energy weapon signature. Revelation 13:13, and the second beast performed great signs to cause even fire from heaven to come down to the earth in the presence of the people. I'm going to go right into scripture this evening because we have so much. I'm going to try to keep myself from getting too distracted going down some rabbit trails. Verse 11, then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. This beast had two horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. And this beast exercised all the authority of the first beast, and caused the earth and all those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. In verse 13, the second beast performed great signs to cause even fire from heaven to come down to earth in the presence of the people. Because of the signs it was given to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image of the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet had lived. The second beast was permitted to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship it to be killed. And then we roll from there into the mark of the beast. Again, familiar scripture in the present day context. I'm not necessarily saying that the fires on the West Coast are an indication of the second beast, but it is, I think, a warning. I think it is a prelude of what is to come. It is certainly unprecedented. You know that I grew up in California. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I worked in Oakland as a paramedic for 27 years in the Bay Area. I went through the Oakland Hills firestorm, and I went through the Loma Prieta earthquake there as a first responder. What is going on in terms of fire in California, Oregon, and Washington truly is beyond comparison. And these are all record-breaking catastrophes that are taking place. In fact, where I used to live before I moved to the East Coast was in Clackamas, Oregon, which is just next door to Portland, Oregon, the next county over. Portland, Oregon, the city's in Multnomah County. I was in Clackamas County. And Clackamas County, about, I forget the acreage, but let's just say it's widespread. They had 4 major fires just in that county alone. And I still have family back there, and I still have friends in that area. So prayers for my family, prayers for my friends, prayers for everyone on the West Coast that is affected, including the smoke effect, not just the fire effect, but the weather and smoke effect in California, Oregon, and Washington. Our prayers against the spirits, our prayers against the so-called governors of the fallen angels who have dominion over the elements on the earth to a limited degree, but they do. So we pray specifically with our most powerful weapons system that God has provided mankind, and that is prayer, the power of prayer, even against a directed energy weapon. This will be a technical Thursday. We are on patch air at 40,000 feet, 50,000 feet in fact, flying over the pyroclastic clouds, the fire and wind generated weather systems within California, Oregon, and Washington because of the size of these fires and the uplifting, the upwelling of the heat. I really would encourage you, if you've never visited Dutch Since, D-U-T-C-H-S-I-N-S-E, and I'm going to put another graphic up with his name on it right now. He's best known for his earthquake reporting as well as earthquake forecasting, which has been extremely accurate, and it is science-based. And I've been following him since, I think, about 2011, if my memory serves me properly. But he also has in his basket of tools that he uses for earthquake reporting, he's also able to take a look at the weather, able to look at the fires, the moisture content in the atmosphere. He's able to pinpoint the geography and the locations within the geography of earthquakes as well as the fires, and has done an extraordinary yeoman's job in the last 3 to 4 days on the fires on the West Coast. We're going to focus specifically on his discovery on Tuesday, which Kathleen and I were watching once we finally returned home after our long journey in the detour on Tuesday, which resulted in the cancellation of our live stream. We were watching Dutch getting very excited about what you see on the screen here. He wasn't looking for it. This was just part of his examination of the fires. And through the various filters, like near-infrared filters, he's able to sift through the data that's coming through the satellite images, and this is what popped up on his screen. Truly, truly extraordinary. So I want to get to his channel here. I've got a lot of slides tonight. It's going to take me a little bit of time to kind of jump around through things, but again, Dutch Since, September 8th, 2020. Directed energy weapon beam shooting from California to Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. Now, you know that I have a bit of a background in physics. I'm going to give you my interpretation. Dutch was describing, for the most part, that it appeared to him that this directed energy beam was originating on the California coast. So in this image down at this lower left corner, the white image you're seeing there, and then moving in a straight line fashion all the way up into Oregon to the refuge. We will talk a little bit about the refuge, its background, its history there a little bit. But my take on it is 180 degrees. I do think this is a directed energy weapon. I do think it is evidence of that he has captured. However, it's not originating from the coastline of California. It is actually originating, as Dutch correctly pointed out and pinpointed for us. And again, please watch. There's 3 videos that he has that are highly recommended. I am surmising, now I have no proof, I have no inside government contacts, etc., but just from my own observations, I'm surmising the point of origin was within the Malheur National Refuge, the game preserve, the game refuge, directing across Oregon and California in a southeasterly direction to the California coast. And I'm going to put up a map for you so you have a little bit better understanding of what this looks like. On the left-hand side, you see the map of California, and up here is San Francisco. If you come down along the coast, there's this indent that you can see in the image to the right on the coastline, and that is Monterey Bay. Coming further south, the first major town or city that you encounter is San Simeon. That's where Hearst Castle is located, San Simeon. And that's where I'm approximating, probably just north, slightly north of San Simeon, is where the directed energy beam finally stops in this particular case. And apparently, according to Dutch's observations, this beam was being transmitted for an hour, perhaps a little bit longer than an hour, from my recollection of his rather excited presentation. And Dutch is pretty even-tempered, pretty even in his delivery. He tries not to be someone who's yelling and hyping things up, and he even says that in his numerous apologies, that he doesn't really get too excited. But this really caught him unawares. So let's just say that this is near San Simeon, California. And it originates, according to my observations, originates right here. Here's Bend, Oregon. We're looking at eastern Oregon. If you were to extend up through the upper left corner of this image, you would run right into Portland, Oregon on the coast. So this is heading east, southeast. Interesting, there's a town, I've been there, named Burns. I wonder why they call it that. Okay, this is all dry desert out here. Okay, yeah, there's a forest to the north, but basically it is all desert, high desert area out in this region. And this is where I think the point of origin is located. Okay, I'm going to build the case. I'm going to show you something, some background on directed energy weapons, show you some of the technology, and then we're going to launch into particle accelerators. This is Technical Thursday. We're going to talk about ring-based synchrotron particle accelerators and linear accelerators, so that you have a background to appreciate why I consider this to be a directed energy weapon produced by a linear, straight line particle accelerator. Therefore, this would not necessarily be considered a directed energy weapon, but a kinetic, K-E-W, kinetic energy weapon. And I'll build my case towards that. Then we're going to move on and talk a little bit retrospectively of some of the things I published in my two novels, Covert Catastrophe and 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, wherein this directed energy linear accelerator technology is cited in both novels, specifically originating out of Stanford with their linear accelerator, where back in 2013, when I published in February of that year, Covert Catastrophe, a few months later, Stanford published an article reflecting the technology in my novel, which are called microaccelerators, accelerators on a chip. I sent you both articles from 2013 and the one from January of this year, which was a follow-up talking about accelerators on the chip. The reason for sharing that with you is because I want you to appreciate, and I'm sure you do, the fact that a linear accelerator does not need to be 2 miles long, as in the case of Stanford's SLAC, Stanford Linear Accelerator, nor does it need to be even 10 meters long, as in the case at CERN of their Awake Linear Accelerator, which I've covered extensively and we will touch on a little bit tonight. These accelerators can be portable enough to be on a truck, a military truck. They can certainly be on a ship. I'm going to show you some examples of those. But they can also be as small as a microchip. So that's where we're headed with all of this, okay? To give you a bigger perspective, here's where the Refuge is located. There is Portland up there on the Washington borderline. If you were to take from the red dot and draw diagonally down towards the California coast, you would arrive at roughly San Simeon, as I pointed out. Okay? So, just want to check the chat room, make sure I haven't lost everybody so far, but this is where we're going. And we have a good crowd here tonight. Thank you everyone for your time. We're probably going to run overtime, provided my voice holds together here. We'll certainly go 2 hours, but we may need more than that to cover all that I've prepared for this evening. Dr. Judy Woods, Mark is saying, her book, Where Did the Towers Go? Highly recommend Dr. Judy Woods' book, Where Did the Towers Go? I agree with you, Mark. Very, very good explanations of directed energy weapons, kinetic energy weapons, and I'm glad you brought that up. Before I do a deep dive, it is my position that a directed energy weapon, not necessarily kinetic energy, but directed energy, was generated at Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York. Let me close the window. It's very warm tonight, but we'll suffer through it. A directed energy weapon from Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is in a straight line from the Twin Towers. In fact, for years before the Twin Towers were even built, in New York, in that area, the zoning restrictions on the height for the buildings that could be constructed between Brookhaven and where the Twin Towers were finally erected was limited so as not to block that straight line path from a synchrotron ring-based particle accelerator at Brookhaven, where utilizing what's known as a magnetic gate was able to release from one of their beam lines. And I'm going to show you all of this detail using Berkeley as an example. Again, because I feature Berkeley in my 2 novels, but it shows you exactly what I'm talking about when I say synchrotron and beam lines. I'm going to show you a magnetic gate which releases accelerated particles from a circular pathway, exiting the circle into a straight beam line, and then at the end of the beam line a gate is opened and the particles and the energy combined is released. Now I'm saying a directed energy weapon, but that's kind of a misnomer because a directed energy and a kinetic energy really work one and the same, because when you accelerate particles, you are also increasing their mass, their resting mass. They're gaining energy due to the acceleration, which increases their mass. So you are talking about solid particles, solid matter, as well as combined with their energies. These were directed at the Twin Towers, which were, as you've seen from the engineers who've done the analysis of the concrete in the rubble, that they found nanothermite having been mixed in with the original concrete in the original construction of both towers. They found nanothermite. That was triggered by a directed energy, kinetic energy weapon released from a synchrotron particle accelerator at Brookhaven National Laboratory. Dr. Judy Woods backs that up. Okay? So, let's dive into some of this really deep material that I have planned for you. We'll try to move through it fairly quickly so we don't get too bogged down. Here is an example of a linear accelerator. The red dots moving through, they can be protons, they can be electrons, they can be ions of lead, ions of gold. And an ion is nothing more than stripping away one or more electrons from the element or adding electrons. Thus you end up with an ion. Lead and gold, of course, are very heavy, very dense, and their impact when they're utilizing this as a collider, such as what they would do at Brookhaven National Laboratory or at CERN, or in the case of a fixed impact point at UC Berkeley, where we're going to go in a few minutes, they are accelerating heavy ions so that they achieve a higher energy release, greater luminosity, which is also the production of more fundamental particles. You see the positive and negative symbols up above the cylinders. That is indicating that the particles are accelerated using electromagnetism. First, the particle is attracted using a positive and then repelled using a negative. Now, that depends upon the state of charge of the particle itself. In the case of an electron, in order to attract an electron, you would use a positive charge within that cylinder. Okay, and these are known as radio frequency cavities, what I refer to as the paddle in the ping pong ball game. So you attract with a positive, and then as that negatively charged electron moves through the cylinder, you then quickly switch from positive to negative, and like charges repel one another. So now you're pushing. First you attract and then you push. You attract and you push all the way down the line. And exiting at the right is an accelerated particle. This is a linear accelerator. Okay? Very much the same thing happens with a ring-based, like at CERN, a ring-based accelerator where they are accelerating particles that are moving in circular pathways, and they will use multiples of this system that you see on the screen right now, because you have two streams of particles moving in opposite directions around the circular pathway at CERN with the LHC. So these radio frequency cavities, these RF cavities, are accelerating particles within two separate streams, two separate beam lines. Thus you have a duplication, you have a doubling of what you're seeing here in terms of two sets of radio frequency cavities or paddle systems. All right? Now, just for the sake of completeness, we're going to move on to some historical technical information on particle accelerators, but here's another image that was captured on Dutch's YouTube channel. Is the beam has moved offshore. Its terminus is out in the ocean. Again, this backs up my hypothesis that this beam originated in the Malheur National Refuge in Oregon, because now you see it terminating out in the middle of the ocean. Yes, it could be ship-based, but I want to go back just for a moment to the original image. Kathleen and I were looking at this, and it doesn't show real well in the screen capture, but when you watch his video, his very first one on the DO weapon, you will notice that here at the shoreline you have a greater concentration in the image, a denser image. But then trailing off towards Oregon, it becomes less dense. It becomes more of a sporadic, broken line, and finally fades out when it arrives at the refuge. To me, this appears to be the signature of what are known in a particle accelerator as bunches. Bunches, and that's the technical term they use, bunches of particles. So if we are talking about, for example, protons, they are bunches of protons that are gathered together. Magnetically, they are compressed together. All right? Into a dense bunch, and there can be multiple bunches. But what appears to me is that they released, and again, Dutch was saying he observed the timeline of this over the period of an hour, perhaps longer. It indicates that there is, at the beginning of the stream, a densely packed grouping of bunches of particles, and then streaming off into and fading off towards Oregon. You're seeing streams of particles and their energy signatures, much like a comet, the tail of a comet, streaming out from the comet itself. Of course, the comet being dense, and the tail, as it moves further from the comet, becoming less and less dense. Again, a signature of a both directed energy weapon, because it does contain energy, but perhaps more appropriately we should call it a kinetic energy weapon, because these are particles that are under acceleration. So you know what, I'm just going to take a second and I'm going to put KEW in there just for the sake of being complete. Just take me a couple of seconds here to do this. Again, kinetic energy weapon. Accelerated particles being released from either a synchrotron particle accelerator or a linear accelerator. I'm going to show you some examples of linear accelerators and lasers, because Dutch was reporting, his thinking was this is a laser beam. I'm going to divert from that opinion, although I'm going to share with you some examples of laser beams. Now, you'll recall in California, the Paradise Fire in 2017, and there was a lot of reporting from the local area, witness testimony, etc., on YouTube about directed energy weapons. One of the researchers that we have interviewed here before, and is someone that I stay in contact with, who lives in the Puget Sound, Washington area, Washington State, Puget Sound area, is Alana Freeland. And Alana Freeland and I have been talking about these events in California. And she has been doing her research and her publishing regarding space-based weaponry, satellite-based weaponry, the space fence, okay, and full spectrum dominance within the space, within the low Earth orbit environment, okay. So she was reporting back in 2017, along with others, that there were directed energy weapons in the form of lasers, either from drones or from satellites, given the direction that the lasers were observed traveling through the atmosphere. Now, one thing I need to point out, lasers typically are not visible to the naked eye unless they're passing through a medium that allows them to be illuminated. Lasers typically are not visible, and when observing a laser, you know that you wear protective glasses to filter out the laser itself, as they're harmful to the retina. So I'm not sure what they were observing in 2017, nor what is being observed here in the last few days in California is actually a laser. In this image, the near-infrared filter was applied by Dutch to reveal this signature, near-infrared, which means that it is not visible to the naked eye. This, of course, is satellite imagery, satellite sensory imagery that he's producing here. So no one on the ground, or if they were flying in the air, would have seen this, okay? But again, I think this is kinetic. I think that these are particles impacting in the San Simeon region of the California coast, with particles streaming out and energy being released in the tail, because it disperses, becomes less dense the further north you follow this line that's on the screen. Okay? All right, let me get to another one. I got to scroll down through here a bit. We're getting there. Here's our cyclotron. This is the 1932 patent filed by Dr. Ernest O. Lawrence Dr. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, that Lawrence. This is his original diagram of a cyclotron. What I'm going to provide to you is a basic understanding of how particles are accelerated using magnets, okay, and radio frequency. We just went through the radio frequency. Here we have a magnetic field that is both confining particles. In this particular example, it's labeled high-speed ions, probably ions of lead. That was pretty common in 1932 to use lead instead of gold. So what you're seeing here in the center, where you see the arrow in the center that is beginning to move in a clockwise direction in an outwardly expanding spiral, are the high-speed ions. They're held to a curved pathway by the magnetic field. Okay, magnetic lines of force you can see on the right-hand side of the image. So they are confining the ions within this device, a cyclotron. They are accelerated using high-frequency oscillation, which you see in the upper corner here. Those are the radio frequency cavity alternating between negative and positive. It is oscillating in a high-frequency manner to push and accelerate using the electrical impulses of magnetism, negative and positive, to pull and push, but confined by the magnetic field to a circular pathway rather than a straight line linear pathway. So number 1 and number 2, those are what are known as the Ds. And you're going to see some other images of that in just a moment. The point here is that there's only one circular pathway of particles. You don't have two contra-rotating beam lines or pathways of particles like you find in the synchrotron, which is a larger version of a cyclotron, as you find at CERN with two pathways. Here you have one pathway that is circulating. So they call it a cyclotron because it is cycling in a circle, and it is going through the cycles of an oscillator to accelerate the ions, okay? This is how accelerated particles are produced. I'm just giving you the history here very quickly. Here's a cyclotron vacuum chamber because the particles need to operate in a high vacuum. Same thing at CERN. The pipe, as it's known at CERN, they spend well over a month just evacuating the interior of the pipe for the two beams. Because if you didn't, those particles, heavy ions of lead or protons, even photons, would impact upon other matter if it's left in the beam, if it's left in the pipeline. Same thing here with a very small, you can hold this in your hand, this device. This is the prototype that Lawrence built at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, at what we used to call, when I went to Berkeley, as the Rad Lab, for radiation lab, up on the hill, because it overlooks Berkeley, overlooks the Bay Area, and I'm going to show you some pictures of that in a moment. So, very straightforward. That's what a small cyclotron looks like. Now, for scale, look here on the right-hand side in the corner of the device, you see a C-clamp, just an ordinary handheld screw-type C-clamp. That gives you some scale of this particular cyclotron. The original could be held in your hand, and it was put together using sealing wax. Okay, that's wax that you would seal up a letter with, you would seal boxes with, sealing wax, S-E-A-L-I-N-G, sealing wax, and cardboard and wood and some metal. That was a prototype, which is typical. This is a little bit larger one, and I'll show you the machine that this fits into, but here's the C-clamp here that kind of gives you some scale on that. Here's a side view of the patent, side view of the device. And what I want to point out to you, you see the circulating cyclotron single beam of heavy ions being circulated. But over here on the left-hand side, you see this rectangular drawing here, this rectangular box, and you see this arrow here. It says target placed here, and it's labeled as a bombardment chamber. That today is known as a beam line. Coming off of the circular cyclotron or synchrotron are straight stainless steel pipes, beam lines. Where you see on the drawing here, window. Today, you would replace the window with a magnetic gate that opens briefly. It allows the escape from the circular pathway, allows for the escape of accelerated particles. Then that magnetic gate slams shut. Because the particles, due to the basic Newtonian law, are not held to a circular pathway by the magnetic lines of force, they will now travel in a straight line trajectory. That's their normal tendency, is to travel in a straight line. Now we have what would ordinarily be produced by a straight line linear accelerator. The reason I'm showing you this is how particles were released at Brookhaven and targeted the towers. Okay? This is what I believe happened in Oregon and California. Not with a synchrotron, but with a linear accelerator. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. But the same concept of particles now traveling in a straight line is what I want to emphasize from this drawing. Okay? This is how you produce a kinetic energy, directed energy weapons system. Particles under acceleration. Okay? That vacuum chamber from the cyclotron that I showed you earlier, it fit into this larger cyclotron. This is showing where a magnetic gate opened. The only reason the beam is visible is because it's interacting with the atmosphere in the room. Otherwise, you wouldn't see anything. But this is the blue beam. Okay? Now, any of you that have read my first novel, and it's carried on into the second one, but in the first novel, Covert Catastrophe, this scenario, opening the magnetic door, the gate, and allowing the particles to escape the accelerator, takes place in the novel. This is how this blue beam idea originated. When we talk about Project Blue Beam in the atmosphere, I present that in the book over the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. This is the first full-scale cyclotron. The black portion here, the horseshoe, is a permanent magnet. It's an electric permanent magnet as long as there's a current. And these are known as the Ds, the halves. And in the middle is the vacuum chamber. And the circulating in one pathway particles would be in here. Now this is up on the hill overlooking the UC Berkeley campus at the Rad Lab, what is now the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. This is a permanent exhibit outside. Weighs several tons. Very heavy. It's all iron and steel and utilizes electricity. I've been up there when I was a student at Berkeley, and even before I was a student at Berkeley, I visited the Rad Lab many times. Okay. That same device is pictured here. On the right-hand side is Dr. Lawrence. On the left-hand side is Stanley Livingston, his co-researcher. They developed this cyclotron. Now that was back in the 30s. It was still operating up through the 50s. This is the present day. The cyclotron was removed from its original building, which, if you're looking at the picture on the right, and you were to look to your right, if you're standing on the hillside overlooking the laboratory, look to the right and just slightly up a hill would have been the old cyclotron building. So just across the street from the old cyclotron building, they built this building to house a ring-based synchrotron particle accelerator. This building is called the Advanced Light Source Building because it produces one of the synchrotron energies, which is referred to as a hard X-ray. Up until about 2 years ago, the hard X-rays produced here at Berkeley were the most powerful, the most luminous X-rays on the planet. That is a synchrotron energy, a result of holding particles under acceleration to a curved pathway that also produces gamma rays, and at 90 degrees to the circular pathway orthogonal are magnetic lines of force. Now, you will recognize these images from my first book, Covert Catastrophe. There's the Advanced Light Source Building. Okay? So I want to come back to this again. If you look at the image on the right and you look just off to the left as you're moving straight towards the San Francisco Bay, you will see a tower here, a spire with a point on it. That's called the Campanile. That is a bell tower. And you know what bells signify in witchcraft and the occult. It's called a bell tower. If you take that and connect a line between the beam line that would exit the synchrotron particle accelerator in Covert Catastrophe, I have it lining up with the tip of that bell tower, the Campanile, which is down on the campus of UC Berkeley. It's just inside Sather Gate. The tower is also known as Sather Tower, okay, and Sather Gate. Then if you draw a line from the bell tower out into the bay itself, it intersects with a lighthouse on the end of Alcatraz Island, known as the Rock. And from that point, you would draw a straight line between the arches of the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge takes its name from the Golden Gate, the Eastern Gate in Jerusalem, where the Jews believe the Messiah will return and enter through the Eastern Gate into Jerusalem. Notice that the arches here point upward, whereas in the Golden Gate, as above, so below, the Golden Gate, the golden arches point downward on the Golden Gate Bridge. In this image, you can see the Golden Gate Bridge off to the right here in this image, and you can see the arches. There's actually 3 arches, one in the middle, and a half arch on the right, half arch on the left, the Golden Gate. Also borrowed from the Golden Age of Kronos, the Golden Gate. And out here is Alcatraz Island, the prison, and on the very end of it is the lighthouse, and that, draw a line that'll connect to the Campanile Bell Tower at Berkeley and continue the same line. It will go right to the center of this synchrotron particle accelerator housed in the Advanced Light Source Building. Might as well call it Lucifer, okay? And down here in these colors, you're seeing beam lines, and I'm going to show you a little bit better picture of that, but these are the beam lines. Okay? This here is called the booster, and then the outside line would be the main ring, the main synchrotron itself. But from here, you draw a straight line right out through the center point of the Golden Gate arch. And if you've read Covert Catastrophe, you know that that line extends out into the constellation of the Big Dipper, out into Ursa Major, known as the Golden Bear. California's state animal is the bear, the golden bear. UC Berkeley's mascot is the golden bear. They're referred to as the Golden Bears. I know, I went to school there. And a straight line connects this synchrotron to the Golden Bear of Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. Okay? So here's what we're talking about. There is a spiritual aspect to this whole thing. You cannot separate the physical, the physics, from the spiritual. They do all of this because there are spiritual ramifications to even building the building where they did and the science that they're conducting there. This is the interior blueprint plan, if you will, of the Advanced Light Source Building. The ring here is the synchrotron. You see the colors. And these straight colored lines that are coming off of the ring are those straight beam lines. We even have a smaller accelerator here, a pre-accelerator with beam lines. What I did in Covert Catastrophe is take one of these beam lines and extend it right out. You see this one, my cursor doesn't show up, but you'll see one in the upper left corner, almost the corner, purple beam line that moves into a large room. And I extended that out to the Campanile, to the lighthouse on Alcatraz, the rock, the Dome of the rock in Jerusalem, okay? That lighthouse, Lucifer, and out through the middle arch of the Golden Gate Bridge. They all line up into the constellation Ursa Major as it rises in the eastern horizon over the ocean. The timing of that event I outline in the book, okay? Again, the Golden Gate in Jerusalem, as above, so below, in their belief, you have an inversion of the Jewish architecture. It's been flipped 180 degrees vertically downward for the building of the Golden Gate Bridge because it's a cult, the Golden Gate Bridge. So the beam lines, if you were to allow those particles to escape their beam lines, they would now become a kinetic energy weapon if you use it as a weapon, or a directed energy weapon, because you're releasing the energy in the particles that are under acceleration. Now, obviously, there are thousands of different types of experiments that they conduct at Berkeley with this machine. This is the same machine that I've mentioned so many times in the mapping of the human genome using hard X-rays to infer the protein folding of the proteins of DNA and so forth and so on. Okay? Where have you seen this before? I'm just going to leave this up. I'm going to go to the chat room. Where have you seen this before? Lynette, the gate in St. Louis is referred to as the Silver Gate. Silver Gate in the east, Golden Gate in the west. The Eastern Gate in Jerusalem is the Golden Gate. They've done a 180 with it, as above, so below. Very good, you guys. That is Ghostbusters. What is this called? Is it labeled here? I don't think it is. What is this known as? And it's not on the labels. This pack. Okay? What do they call this pack? What do they call it? Just want to take a little break from all the seriousness here. You're right, Mark. You're right, Mark, about Berkeley. Jan, you're very close. Very, very close. In the movie, they referred to this as a Proton Pack. Okay? Just want to kind of have a little bit of a break in here. There it is. It's the Proton Pack. Don't cross the streams. There you go, PS. Very good. I'm going to go back to that just for a moment. Now, many of you have probably noticed this while it was up the first time. Look down here in the lower left corner, synchronous generator. Synchronous generator. This circular object right here, it has the 4 red circles in it. That's more than a synchronous generator. Kathleen has taken apart Ghostbusters extensively in the past. I won't step on her toes on that. But that is a synchrotron. That is a synchrotron particle accelerator. And they know it full well, believe me, okay? Remember, the prototype that Dr. Lawrence built would fit in the palm of your hand, the one made with sealing wax and cardboard and metal. It would hold in the palm of your hand. That's about the same size as what you're seeing here in the Proton Pack. Now the beam lines, the straight beam lines where the particles are allowed to escape the circular pathway, they're escaping out that black hose that arrives at the handle and the barrel of that emitter where the tip is. So in their design, their version of a straight line, beam line, is actually this flexible hose that terminates in the handle and that they then trigger and release. Again, magnetic gate. They trigger and they release the accelerated particles along with their energy out of that. Okay? So this was back in the early 80s, this movie came out. And they were talking all about a proton pack, a proton synchrotron particle accelerator directed energy weapon. The reason I'm showing this to you, other than the fact that it's kind of fascinating and kind of fun, but is to show you that you can create a small, compact particle accelerator. And we're going to go even smaller than this. But remember, the prototype you could hold in your hand. So a synchrotron does not need to be in a large building. It can be very small. There are, in hospitals, small synchrotrons. Okay? All right. Let me go to another image here. This is going back to CERN. Way back in 2015, I first broke to the world a discussion about the Awake Linear Accelerator at Berkeley, which accepts pre-accelerated particles from the Super Proton Synchrotron, the SPS, at 400 gigaelectron volts, pre-accelerated particles, typically protons, and they leave that pre-accelerator and go directly into Awake. They don't travel around the main ring of the LHC. This was a proof of concept. It's no longer functional, but it is a proof of concept experiment that began in 2015 and terminated in 2018. This is a plasma Wakefield linear accelerator. So you see in green at the top there the accelerating field. That's a plasma wake, just like surfing a wave. Okay? You see the trapped electrons up there. That acts as a excuse me, as a targeting system. They call it a witness beam for targeting. A witness beam of electrons travel along those waves. Then there's a driving pulse, and I'll show you another image of that driving pulse. It actually looks like a disk that then pushes protons, a bunch. You see the word there, proton bunch. That's a grouping. That's a bunch of protons that are very compact. This is a linear accelerator. Okay? Just going to leave that up. That's the linear accelerator. Again, this is another drawing graphical representation. Blue are the wakes. These are plasma wakes. Here are the electrons in red as they're being pushed by the waves. Okay? Sorry, I'm looking for an image here. Give me just a second. There's an image that didn't come through on the program. I need to post this very quickly. We will find it. Okay. And there's another example of what I'm talking about. These disc-shaped things, those are the waves. Here are the groups of electrons. Moving through are the protons. Just to give you, this is an interior view of the linear accelerator. And yet another view. And just to give you some scale, here is a researcher alongside Awake. There's Awake right there, the tube. It's not very big. It's only 10 meters in length. That's 30 feet approximately. And I have another view of it I'm going to post here, just so you have a sense of how small these can be built, how small they can be. There's Awake. And the main chamber, again, is about 30 feet in length. This is in a tunnel 300 feet below ground, just off of the main ring of the LHC. This is a prototype This is a linear accelerator. It is a plasma Wakefield. In 30 feet, 10-meter distance, they were able to achieve 1,000-fold greater acceleration of particles using plasma Wakefields to push the particles. They were able to accelerate in that short distance an acceleration gradient 1,000 times greater than the main ring of the Large Hadron Collider itself. This is the future of accelerators, plasma Wakefield. Now, as you know, with prototypes, you typically build them bigger because you're going through the trial and error process, and then once they have it down, then they scale it down. You don't have to have a huge facility for a linear accelerator. Again, going back to the SLAC at Stanford, it's a 2-mile long linear accelerator. You don't need one that large. Okay? Let me see if I have another image to share with you. We're moving along pretty well here tonight. I'm not getting off onto tangents, so I'm a little more disciplined this time. Okay. Now that you have that in your mind, let's go back to this image from Dutch Sense's video. And let me fix the graphic. Let's get that in there where it's supposed to be. And there we are. Kinetic energy weapon, directed energy weapon. What would exit from kinetic energy weapon is what you're seeing on the screen. Here are the bunches, just like we showed, exiting from a wake. This very much could be something that was derived from the research at CERN, building the prototype. Again, they called it a proof of concept device. This could be reflective, quite literally, of that. To me, this is not a very sophisticated weapon. I think this was a demonstration, because the technology is certainly much more advanced than just running around starting fires with. I'm going to get a couple of more images here. This is a laser, which is an energy weapon. Laser is discrete light that is focused.
Hey, hon.
Yes?
When you get a second, that photo that you just had up with the yellow, you know, the awake that you,
Yes.
that you just had up, if you can go back to it, there were 2 rolls of duct tape on the step, and I said, did you see the duct tape?
I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just posted it.
They want to see it.
Okay, it's the duct tape is on the screen. There's your duct tape. Looks like white duct tape in this particular example. I think I have another image of this laser system. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. Didn't post. Anyway, the laser systems, this would be a shipboard. You can also mount it on a vehicle. It's not a huge device. But I don't think in the case of what we're talking about in California is a laser. Because going through the smoke, even a discrete, high-powered laser system would tend to be disrupted. It would be dispersed. It would be broken up, penetrating through layers of smoke. Therefore, I'm pushing more towards kinetic energy, directed energy weapon from a particle accelerator located in Washington State. Okay? I'm going to put the original image back on the screen here. Sent you a few things that I'd like to reference as that is on the screen. If you look at the article, if you haven't already, entitled Sample Paper, Overview of Accelerator Applications for Security and Defense. Sent that to you earlier today. My excerpt, I'll just read very quickly. Many countries have interest in developing a robust defense against attack from intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, area missiles, or cruise missiles. During the Star Wars era, efforts were made to intercept missiles in boost, mid-course, or terminal phase with a particle beam rather than another missile. Such a directed energy weapon uses a high energy beam of particles to damage the structure of the target or simply overheat it until it is no longer operational. The high-powered beam could originate either from a space-based or Earth-based accelerator, or it could be a photon beam generated by an Earth-based free electron laser driven by an induction accelerator or a space-based chemical laser produced photon beam. Again, I think in the case of California, it is not an electron laser. I think in this particular case, we are looking at a particle beam. The source of what I just read comes from OSTI.gov, the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Scientific and Technical Information. This is a peer-reviewed paper. This was published January 1 of 2015, produced by Sandia National Laboratory in Livermore, California. The paper itself, the PDF, is open to the public. I'm looking at it right now. If you've looked at it previously and you're reading through this, I want to just read a little bit of the introduction of Accelerators in Security and Defense, Part 2. Accelerator laboratories and technologies continue to make significant contributions to the diverse needs of security and defense. These applications range from providing fundamental databases for radiation interactions with materials, nuclear forensics, isotope production, and high-energy density physics to system-level technology developments of directed energy system concepts, cargo inspection and interrogation, industrial and medical radiological source replacement, and stockpile stewardship. Now that last part, stockpile, refers to the stewardship, maintaining the readiness of our stockpile of nuclear devices. Okay? Directed energy technology. This is in item 2.2 from the paper. Many countries have interest in developing a robust defense against attack from intercontinental ballistic missiles. We just read that part. Okay? Skipping down, the high-powered beam could originate either from a space-based, which it could be in this situation if it was in a very low Earth orbit at a very low angle of aiming, low angle of attack, this could have been a satellite-based system, possibly, but I think it is more Earth-based, and it says here the high-power beam could originate either from a space-based or Earth-based accelerator, or it could be a photon beam generated by an Earth-based free electron laser driven by an induction accelerator, etc., etc. Since charged particle beams diverge rapidly due to mutual repulsion, neutral particle beams are more commonly proposed for directed energy weapons. Cyclotrons, LINACs, that's a linear accelerator, and synchrotrons can accelerate protons until their velocity approaches the speed of light. The high-energy protons can capture electrons from electron emitter electrodes and become electrically neutralized. Okay, so that means they're balanced. They'll stay coherent. They'll stay together in bunches for long distances. That's what that means. A neutral particle beam traveling at near the speed of light and containing gigajoules of kinetic energy. And when they say gigajoules, joules refers to electrical potential, electrical capacitance, if it's stored. Particles under acceleration are rated in electron volts. Electron volts are also labeled in joules. It depends on the quantity. Typically, you hear me talking about tera-electron volts and peta-electron volts when I talk about the synchrotron at CERN. Here, they're just using a slightly different label, but they're still talking about the resting mass of actual physical particles. Gigajoules of kinetic energy. When they talk about kinetic, that means a solid particle that is moving. Okay? Gigajoules of kinetic energy will nullify any realistic means of defending the target, in this case a missile. That means that they are directing a light beam moving at near the speed of light that contains physical particles, in this case protons and electrons, traveling so quickly, and they are not detectable with the naked eye, but they can be with filters like near infrared, but moving so quickly and acquiring the target so quickly and accurately that they're saying this will nullify any realistic means of defending the target. A benefit of the Star Wars research was that it also led to several important accelerator-related developments, among them the radio frequency quadrupole, RFQ. Now, what that means, a quadrupole, those are magnets. Those are 4 magnets. Okay? Quadrupoles are contained in the Large Hadron Collider, along with dipoles. Quadrupoles are for confining the stream, creating the bunches of particles, very densely packed bunches. And the dipoles are the steering magnets that hold those accelerated particles to a curved trajectory. Okay? Induction accelerators were also tested for propagating charged particle beams through the atmosphere. Now, for propagating, that means to produce, obviously. It means to be able to shoot, to use a little different vernacular, to shoot charged particle beams through the atmosphere. Okay, propagate charged particle beams through the atmosphere for missile defense due to their capability for handling kiloampere beams. That's a high amperage beam. Induction accelerators were later used to drive free electron lasers and as flash X-ray sources for dynamic radiographic imaging. The dielectric wall accelerator promises a compact form factor and accelerating gradients on the order of 100 megavolts per meter for short pulses. This technology will enable field deployable, you hear that? Field deployable directed energy technologies such as high power microwave sources, electron accelerators for producing highly directional gamma ray beams through Compton scattering, and giga-electron volt proton accelerators for long standoff interrogation. Long standoff interrogation means being able to acquire a target at a distance, track that target, and deliver your weapon to that target from a distance, okay? Giga-electron volt proton accelerators. This is what I think we are seeing in California, okay? Let me see if there's anything else worth pulling out of this, because they cover a lot of different applications, but that was the one more specific to what we are talking about this evening. And I think, yep, that covers it. Let me read this last one. It's very short. High energy density physics. This is 2.8 in the document. High energy densities involves the science of matter and radiation under extreme conditions, and is generally defined to be an energy density exceeding, and I won't read it, it's 10 to the 11th power of joules per cubic meter. 10 to the 11th joules per cubic meter. That's just a lot of energy, okay? Accelerator facilities that produce controllable high energy density environments, such as those found in plasmas. Remember, a wake is a plasma Wakefield linear accelerator. Okay? Those found in plasmas provide phenomenological understanding of radiation effects that is important to security and defense. Specifically, high energy density science ensures that engineered systems are able to operate as intended in the radiation environments they encounter, and enables the development of new radiation resistant systems. Okay, that's an EMP resistant system, and validates models that are used to certify the performance of critical components in extreme temperature and pressure environments. Particularly important to the security and defense mission are accelerator technologies that produce high energy X-ray sources for radiation effects testing and enable measurement of very high pressure dynamic material properties and provide intense radiation environments for high exposure applications. Okay, awful lot of diving into the technical there. What we are reading through, what we are looking at from the Department of Energy is basically what I think was used in California. Yeah, Lynette, Kathleen and I watched it live. So when Dutch went crazy, when he found the dew, we were there. Okay. Yes, I'm seeing that in the chat room. Let me get rid of some of these tabs so that I can see what's going on my computer. Let's look at Wikipedia for just a second. Again, just for the background on particle accelerators. A particle accelerator is a machine that uses electromagnetic fields to propel charged particles to very high speeds and energies, and to contain them in a well-defined beam. Large accelerators are used for basic research in particle physics, and they talk about CERN and Brookhaven National Laboratory, and the Tevatron, which is at Fermi National Laboratory in Bottville, Illinois. Okay. Let me see if there's something worth extracting here from that we haven't already covered. Remember we talked about Keck in Japan, the CERN equivalent, but it's a linear accelerator. Keck B, Beast and Bell, we covered that last week. Colliding matter and antimatter, electrons and protons together. These are energy weapons systems, plain and simple. They want to claim that they're looking for new physics, NP. They want to claim that they're trying to solve dark matter, especially at Keck in Japan. They claim that they're trying to determine the origins of the universe. Okay? The prima materia, the first matter, the singularity. That's what they claim. But you know, virtually all of science is weaponized. They're all weapons programs. Do you really think that they're going to build all these accelerators, including CERN, just for the sake of pure science? Just because people are curious? Just because they think they have hypotheses and theories? Do you really think that they're going to spend now several $billion in the case of CERN, but other accelerators? And they're well over 1,000 synchrotrons and linear accelerators around the planet. And as we've talked about before, we've cited before, sorry, I got to get some light going here. Live television, isn't it grand? There we go. Why would governments that are at war with each other on the military front, at war economically, at war politically, theologically, at war with each other, why would they willingly come together in what they call their experiments as collaborations? Why would they collaborate? Why would they put their best and brightest scientists, engineers, theoretical and experimental particle physicists, and their millions of dollars, why would they contribute? Why would they collaborate? Yes, these are weapons systems. I don't care if it's the Sesame, the Arab version of a synchrotron particle accelerator called Sesame, Open Sesame, right? The Arab accelerator. Can't separate the physical from the spiritual. Why? Why are they building these in a collaborative fashion? Here it is. You've heard me say this. It's to kill God and his angels. This is Satan building out his weapons systems. Because when he is cast down, when he is imprisoned here on this planet, Kathleen has said this many times as well, when he is imprisoned on this planet, he only has his technology. He only has humanity. He no longer is allowed to travel between heaven and earth. All he has is his beast system. And therefore he is at warp speed, at light speed or warp speed, accelerating his technologies to have them in place, because he doesn't know when the restrainer is going to be lifted, the Holy Spirit. He does not know when Christ is going to return, but he knows Christ is going to return. So he is enslaving humanity to build out all of these technologies. Now the other question, and I'm going to go back to Dutch's fabulous reporting. He's an independent thinker, Dutch. If you've never been to his channel, you'll see by the way he reports and his personality, and he reports on the facts. He is definitely an independent thinker. He's definitely an independent researcher. He is definitely a critical thinker. And he doesn't care that he gets interfered with. He He doesn't care that the United States Geological Service, the USGS, hounds him with his earthquake reporting. He's a good critical thinker. And it is appropriate. It's fitting that Dutch is the one that brought this evidence forward, this factual reporting. Now, of course, there are going to be the detractors, the scoffers, and the trolls, and the disinformation agents out there that are going to try and say that this is something other than a directed energy or kinetic energy weapon. I think I have demonstrated to you, briefly tonight, I have demonstrated to you that this is the signature of an energy weapon. Let's just call it that. It's an energy weapon. So let's put another label on there just for the fun of it. Because remember, these videos go out to the public in a few days. They don't have the benefit of what you know over the last almost 4 years of sharing information. We collaborate here. You all do your own independent thinking and critical thinking and send your research to us. This is definitely a collaborative effort. This is an energy weapons system. Let's just make it a singular. An energy weapon. You know me, I try to be detailed and correct and accurate and all those good things. So there we are. This is an energy weapon signature. Doesn't matter what the detractors and everybody else is going to say over the next few days, over the coming days. And I'm sure you'll see things on YouTube where they're going to try to shoot down, pardon the pun, shoot down Dutch Sense and his findings here. But I think I'm bolstering his case that this is an energy weapon. And again, just to review what I said at the beginning, the point of origin is from Oregon. This is not from the coastline, because this is like the tail of a comet. It becomes more dispersed and weaker as you move back to the point of origin, back to its source. This is the bunches of the particles at the beginning, okay? Okay, I think I covered all of those. Let's move on. We need an acronym for energy weapon, PS is saying. Okay, well, how about EW? Like EW. EW, it's an EW. An energy weapon. We always have to have acronyms, don't we? Okay. You guys are great. Love the chat room. Yeah, Jan, he was initially investigating the correlation between fires and fault lines. Yes. And then he was startled by the beams. He has, as you know, for a long time, he has been making the case that where there is tectonic movement, where the plates are moving or there are fissures that are opening up near volcanoes or near the fracking sites in California, fracking sites, of course, in Texas and Oklahoma, fires erupting spontaneously near geothermal drilling points, fracking operations, pumping under high pressure water, sewage water in fact, into the earth to fracture the rock and release gas and oil, that he has definitively shown, especially in California, in the fracking locations and in the naturally occurring geothermal areas and around old ancient dormant volcanoes where there are cracks in the earth. And sometimes he mentions this, but not often enough. I don't think he mentions methane. The release of methane is very common. He talks about piezoelectric earthquake lights visible just before an earthquake hits. Earthquake lights in the sky, piezoelectric effects. Yes, that, but also methane is released. And there we are. Methane, of course, is easy to ignite, highly flammable. Okay? All right. Let's see. All right. Just looking through the chat room. All right, guys. Let me get back to articles that I have sent to you. Okay, we finished that. Now, I said we're going to kind of go back to my two novels. I want to continue with talking about particle accelerators. I sent you an article from January 2nd of this year that basically is a repeat. They rehash the same news over and over, even over the course of the years. Back in 2013, they published the same information, Stanford did, that they published in January 2nd of 2020. This is from Stanford News. Stanford researchers build a particle accelerator that fits on a chip, miniaturizing a technology that can now find new applications in research and medicine. Just as engineers once compressed some of the power of room-sized mainframes into desktop PCs, so too have Stanford researchers shown how to pack some of the punch delivered by today's ginormous, what a ridiculous word, ginormous particle accelerators onto a tiny silicon chip. Okay? So, let us get the chip on the screen so that you can see this. Let's get another one. There we go. Okay, guys. Jumping around. Here we go. Particle accelerator on a chip. I don't know what happened with my other images that I put up, but sometimes the software can be a little flaky. This is a cross-section of an accelerator on a chip. Okay? On a hillside above Stanford University, the Stanford Linear Accelerator National Accelerator Laboratory operates a scientific instrument nearly 2 miles long. In this giant accelerator, a stream of electrons flows through a vacuum pipe as bursts of microwave radiation nudge the particles ever faster forward until their velocity approaches the speed of light, creating a powerful beam that scientists from around the world use to probe the atomic and molecular structures of inorganic and biological materials. For the first time, okay, remember this first came out in 2013 after I published Covert Catastrophe in February. A few months later, Stanford published what I'm reading to you now that they're repeating in 2020. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, now, for the first time, scientists at Stanford and SLAC have created a silicon chip that can accelerate electrons, albeit at a fraction of the velocity of that massive instrument, using an infrared laser to deliver in less than a hair's width the sort of energy boost that it takes microwaves many feet. Writing in the January 3rd issue of Science, a team led by electrical engineer Alana Freeland explained how they carved a nanoscale channel out of silicon, sealed it in a vacuum, and sent electrons through this cavity while pulses of infrared light, to which silicon is as transparent as glass to visible light, were transmitted by the channel walls to speed the electrons along. The accelerator on a chip demonstrated in Science is just a prototype. Well, what was 2013? It was a prototype. This is ridiculous. I don't know. They're stupid. I'm just going to say it. They're stupid for rehashing old news. It can be scaled up to deliver particle beams accelerated enough to perform cutting-edge experiments in chemistry, material science, and biological discovery that don't require the power of a massive accelerator. The largest accelerators are like powerful telescopes. There are only a few in the world, and scientists must come to places like Stanford to use them. We want to miniaturize accelerator technology in a way that makes it more accessible research tool. Okay, back in 2013, they were talking about tabletop size linear accelerators. Okay? So I won't bore you with the rest of this. You get the point here of what I'm trying to demonstrate. The image you're looking at, I'll read the caption. This image, magnified 25,000 times, shows a section of an accelerator on a chip. The gray structures focus infrared laser light, shown in yellow and purple, on electrons flowing through the center channel. By packing 1,000 channels onto an inch-sized chip, Stanford researchers hope to accelerate electrons to 94% the speed of light. Now, I have a theory. This is conjecture. The reason they're republishing old news about this chip is because they're already years in advancement beyond what they're describing in this article from January of 2020. They're not going to stay at the prototype level that they were at in 2013. This is to distract. This is to divert attention away from what they have developed. That's my conjecture. Okay? Call me a conspiracy theorist. I don't care. Let's talk about how this fits into my first novel, Covert Catastrophe, from February of 2013. I had been reading some of the early papers before there was a published paper in, let's see, what was the date? In Patreon, I sent this to you guys. Let me get that back up. Sorry, I've got so much here. I just have to be able to jump around a little bit because there's a whole list of things. I'm going to find the date when that was published. I think it was April of 2013. There we go. Particle accelerator on a chip. September, oh, even later. September 27th of 2013, researchers demonstrate accelerator on a chip. Okay? It's just, they just don't want us to know where they're really at with their research. That's my point. That is my point on that. So, Covert Catastrophe. Move my microphone and we'll put a... There it is on the screen. So, February 2013, I published this. Micro accelerators, MAs. If you've read my two books, you know that micro accelerators are accelerators on a chip. The chips are housed in a stainless steel ball, about the size of a US 25-cent coin in diameter. Those micro accelerators, MAs as I call them in the book, function as drones. They swarm. This is before we had drone technology that swarmed, that had the ability to communicate with each other and be directed by a computer in a swarm. I published this in 2013. They would function in a swarm pattern that was 3 concentric rings, an inner, a middle, and an outer ring of stainless steel balls. And utilizing a remote control, radio controlled hobby, like with a helicopter or a fixed wing aircraft or a drone, radio controlled, you could cause these spherical stainless steel balls to rotate in opposite directions, contra-rotating rings, just like the particles that are accelerated in a synchrotron particle accelerator like Brookhaven or at CERN. They move in opposite directions. Now there's 3 of them, 3 rings of these stainless steel balls, these micro-accelerator balls. So only one is actually moving in the opposite direction to the other 2. Then they form up as they rise. You picture taking 3 rings that are flat, taking the outer ring and beginning to elevate it, then the middle ring beginning to elevate as well, leaving the center ring at the bottom. You begin to form a cone. And because they're rotating, they have the same configuration as a tornado. They move like a tornado and can be directed like steering a tornado. It's a weapons system. And in both novels, they're used as weapons systems. Very simple, and because they're accelerators on a chip, they are able to direct their energies, directed energy weapon, kinetic energy weapon. The micro accelerators emit energy, kinetic and directed energy. So if you haven't read the books yet, you might find that interesting from a scientific standpoint, hopefully from an entertainment standpoint as well. I'll just do a little plug for the books. To the general public that listens to the live stream later, in a few days' time, the books can be purchased at anthonypatch.com, either in print or you can get them as a electronic file. Patrons, you already get the books. I already send them as PDFs to you, as electronic files, so you can read them anytime. Deborah, you don't need to buy them. You're already a patron, so go to the Patrons Archives, and you will find the books in the archives for patrons. If you want to email me directly as a patron, I'll send you the links to those books. Also, when you subscribe to Untitled Magazine, if you're not a patron and you want to subscribe individually, subscribers to Untitled Magazine, I'll also send you the PDFs of my books for subscribing. Okay? So, just a little plug there. There's a lot of technology in those 2 novels. Without tooting my own horn too much here, virtually every piece of technology that I wrote about in 2013 and 2014 has been revealed publicly over the ensuing years. So it's amazing. It's amazing how, if you do your research, you can not tell the future, I'm not saying that, but you can extrapolate how technology will be applied. And I've been pretty accurate so far. I'm still waiting for the micro accelerators, my tornadoes, to show up. The little stainless steel balls with the accelerator on a chip housed in the stainless steel balls. I'm still waiting for those to be revealed. But at least now, tonight, and this is really my point in having brought this up, you see Particle accelerators can be as small as a chip or as large as a Large Hadron Collider, as large as the Awake linear accelerator. They can be mounted on a truck. They can be mounted on a ship. So they could very easily have been on a truck in Oregon at the Malheur, I think it is, Malheur National Game Refuge. Could easily have been. And then they move it, and you'd never see it. I want to read just a little bit about that refuge. I promised that I would do that, so I'm going back to my notes. Let's see what we can find on that. Here it is. I'm fairly organized tonight, just a lot to cover, so I'm jumping around. This comes from National Public Radio, October 12th, 2016. Anti-government standoff puts Oregon's Malheur back on the tourist map. Okay, skipping down, skipping down, skipping down. All right, here we go. While the maze of backcountry roads and hiking trails have reopened, the Refuge Visitor Center, including its bookstore, museum, and grounds, remains closed due to security reasons. There's only a guard and a padlocked gate at the entrance where months ago Ammon Bundy and his militia followers gathered in a snowy sagebrush for their daily press conferences. Okay, a lot of work is behind schedule. This is 2016. According to Fish and Wildlife Services, they moved their office in Portland. During the occupation itself, it says biologists and other field staff traumatized by the siege have since quit or requested transfers. All of this occurring as the refuge experience itself is experiencing more visitors than it has in years. Whatever the reason, the fact that there's a boom in tourism is ironic when you consider that the mostly out-of-state occupiers had said that they were there to call attention to how the federal government is hurting the economy in the West. All right, so that was just a touch point. I won't go into the whole thing. But that's what Dutch was alluding to in his video, and I wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit. This was the Ammon Bundy standoff in the very same refuge as we are seeing now from the directed energy weapons employed in targeting California. Okay? Going back to lasers for just a moment, Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin's Advanced Test High Energy Asset System, also known as Athena, cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. Also known as Athena, is a prototype laser weapon system that is designed to defeat close-in, low-value threats such as improvised rockets, unmanned aerial systems, vehicles, and small boats. Athena is a transportable ground-based system that serves as a low-cost test bed for demonstrating technologies required for military use of laser systems. A ruggedized variant of the system would be suitable for military operations. Now, these are for short range. Again, yes, a laser could possibly, powerful enough, coherent enough, could extend from Oregon into California, possibly. But they're typically short range. Okay? This is why I'm going into KEW, DEW in this particular situation. I think I have a note on Athena here. Little background on Athena. This is from Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia. I don't care what people say. Athena, often given the epithet Pallas, is an ancient Greek goddess. This is the name for their laser system from Lockheed. They pick these acronyms on purpose. It's for spiritual reasons. Then they force the label of their system to fit the spiritual name. Athena is an ancient Greek goddess associated with wisdom, handicraft, and wait for it, warfare, who was later syncretized with the Roman goddess Minerva. Athena was regarded as the patron and protectress of various cities across Greece, particularly the city of Athens, from which she most likely received her name. In Greek mythology, Athena was believed to have been born from the forehead. Okay, that's the prefrontal cortex. That's critical thinking location in the brain, folks. Athena was believed to have been born from the forehead of her father, Zeus. In the founding myth of Athens, Athena bested Poseidon in a competition over patronage of the city by creating the first olive tree. She's known as Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, but in one archaic Attic myth, the god Hephaestus tried and failed. Well, this is rather graphic. Skip over it. She plays an active role in the Iliad, in which she assists the Achaeans, I think that's also known as the Argonauts from the movie, and in the Odyssey, she is the divine counselor to Odysseus. So, anyway, very interesting. Associated with wisdom, handicraft, and warfare, Athena cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. Going back to our directed energy weapons just a little bit. This is from Chemtrail Planet. Pretty good. This is old news, but Chemtrail Planet, if you type in directed energy weapons at chemtrailplanet.com, there's a good rundown on the fires in 2017 in California. Okay? So if you want a little more on the history, you want to look at some of the findings from those fires in 2017 that I mentioned at the beginning, that's a pretty good source. Okay? Let's go to DARPA. I have two items. First, I want to go to DARPA and my first book, Covert Catastrophe. A little more technology I presented in 2013. This is September 8th of 2020 from DARPA, published by Asia Times. DARPA, the Pentagon's mad scientists at work. 10 high-risk, high-reward Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency projects that stretch the imagination. Really? Stretch the imagination. Okay. The DARPA has announced the start of a 5-year, $26 million effort to develop brain implants that can treat mental disease with deep brain stimulation. All right, so that's nothing new. But I want to skip down. They have a number of items, and I posted this to the patrons in this article of projects they're working on. I want to go down to number 7, frozen soldiers. They continue in the article. You'll see this fairly often on mystery and conspiracy websites. Quote, DARPA wants frozen soldiers. Those same websites sometimes also claim that the U.S. is going to unleash an army of White Walkers and Olafs over the ice caps to destroy Russia. In actuality, DARPA just wants to put injured people in biostasis to give medical personnel more time to evacuate and treat them, potentially turning the golden hour of medevacs into the golden couple of days. Now, if you've read Covert Catastrophe, you know where I'm going with this. This could be done by rapidly lowering blood temperatures, something the medical community has looked at for heart attack victims. But DARPA's program focuses on proteins and cellular processes, hopefully allowing for interventions at room temperature. If it works, expect to see the process in use in a war with near peers who can force our medevac birds to stay on the ground, and expect to see it quickly copied to ambulance services around the world. All right, so what are they talking about? What am I talking about? All right. I included this in the posting to the patrons. See, if you join as a patron, you get a whole lot more than just live streams. This paper was published March 18th of 2014. Remember, I published Covert Catastrophe in February of 2013. This is a peer-reviewed paper that came out in 2014. This is in Critical Care from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. Title, peer-reviewed paper, is pharmacological H2S induced, that's H2S induced, quote, suspended animation feasible in the intensive care unit? By definition, suspended animation is a hypometabolic, that means a low metabolism, hypometabolic state characterized by the, quote, the slowing of life processes by external means without termination. And it'll go on and talk about a lot of things here, but I'll just make it short for you. Various mammals species are capable of nearly completely shutting down their vital functions in order to survive otherwise lethal environmental conditions, such as prolonged impairment of oxygen supply and/or extreme temperatures. First described and studied in patients as hibernation artificiale, induced by the so-called cocktail lytique during the Indochina War in the early 1950s. For obvious reasons, the concept of inducing a hypometabolic condition has attracted special interest in intensive care and emergency medicine. Originally, organoprotection, in particular for the central nervous system, was demonstrated when suspended animation was induced by rapidly cooling experimental animals to core body temperatures of about 10 to 15 degrees centigrade using ice-cold infusions or cardiopulmonary bypass. Now, I'll skip down through some of that and we'll get to the hydrogen sulfide. That's what H2S means, is hydrogen sulfide. These authors demonstrated that mice inhaling hydrogen sulfide reversibly decreased their energy expenditure, which was associated with a fall in core temperature. In the meantime, numerous preclinical studies have been published on the possible organ protective effects of hydrogen sulfide, the available data being equivocal depending on the model used and the type of shock investigated. In this context in particular, the impact of hydrogen sulfide effects on energy metabolism remains a matter of debate. Therefore, the present chapter reviews the available data on hydrogen sulfide induced on-demand hypometabolism and its relation, directly as well as via a possible consecutive drop in body temperature, to organ protective properties. All right, here's the deal. This is why I'm kind of tooting my own horn here. This paper as they just referenced, was and is based upon previous studies, which is typical, okay? That's common. Give me a second. I just lost the... Hang on. I just lost you guys in the chat room. Let me get it back so that I can communicate with you. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. I don't know why this system does this. See if I can get the chat room back. Nope. Sorry guys, I lost the chat room. No, there it is. It popped back up. That's pretty crazy. Okay, are we here? Are we still here? All right. Let me know in the chat room you can still see and hear me. Okay, we're getting to the Ohio FEMA camp PS, okay? All right, good, here we are. I don't know, the system's flaky. Here's the point, here's the thing that I wanted to point out. In Covert Catastrophe, the hero of the story utilizes hydrogen sulfide to treat a critically injured, due to a gunshot wound, critically injured young girl as they're transporting the girl to the trauma center, to the children's trauma center. And it is a fairly long transport to the children's trauma center. And because of that, he decides to administer by mask inhalation of hydrogen sulfide. It is in the storyline, it is not approved for care, for treatment, except by physician order in a field trial. It's being field tested. But he cannot and does not have the opportunity to contact the base hospital physician to provide the authority, the prescription, if you will, to use hydrogen sulfide on this patient. So he takes it upon himself to administer the hydrogen sulfide so as to put the patient in stasis, hibernation, until the patient can be delivered at the hospital. February 2013. This paper came out in September. Okay? It's worth reading the books, I think. That's kind of my point. DARPA, okay, this paper was published in March of 2014 that I just read excerpts from. So a year and a month after I published it in the book. There's a lot of really good technology in the book that still hasn't been really released publicly. So, somebody wants to talk about Ohio. So that's the Frozen Soldiers program at DARPA. They're finally getting around to implementing what I published in my book. Okay? Frozen soldiers. They're not really frozen. They are dropping their body temperature, but they're not frozen. They're just dropping the body temperature to lower the metabolism, which is, the purpose of that is to reduce the oxygen demand by the heart, the brain, and the major organs of the body, by using hydrogen sulfide to reduce that oxygen demand. That puts them into stasis long enough to be able to go to a higher level of care, which is typically a surgeon, trauma surgeon, in the operating room. Okay? All right, radically shifting gears here. This is from the Ohio Star, dated September 4th of this year. Ohio FEMA camps. Still more questions than answers. The Ohio Star reported on September 3rd that Ohio Department of Health Interim Director Lance Himes released an order on August 31st, an order creating FEMA shelters and legalizing their use for people who, quote, are unable to safely quarantine in their place of residence and to isolate those diagnosed with or showing symptoms of COVID-19, end quote. Now, you guys are on top of this. You know this has been coming. We've been warning about this coming. This is the fascism. This is the heavy-handedness. This is taking healthcare and utilizing it to push a fascist agenda. COVID-19 is nothing but a plandemic. We've covered all that for months. We've been warning that FEMA would be activating their camps, and that if a person is determined that they cannot safely self-quarantine in their place of residence, what does that mean? Let's say one person in a family of 6 people in a house or an apartment, condominium, in a RV mobile home trailer. That one person is not able to be properly isolated with their own separate bedroom and their own separate bathroom and have their meals delivered to them safely by family members. If those requirements cannot be met, which means are unable to safely quarantine in their place of residence, if that criteria cannot be met that I just described, then they are going to take you out of your place of residence and to isolate those diagnosed with or showing symptoms of COVID-19, it says. Taking people out of their homes and putting them in FEMA camps. Ohio Star. We said it was coming. Been saying it for months. Been saying it all. The non-congregate, don't you love their language? The non-congregate FEMA sheltering will be utilized throughout the state for people, according to the examples given by Himes, who, quote, test positive for COVID-19, who do not require hospitalization but need isolation, including those exiting from hospitals, those who have been exposed to COVID-19 who do not require hospitalization, and asymptomatic high-risk individuals needing social distancing as a precautionary measure. So your 85-year-old grandparents who show no signs or symptoms, they're asymptomatic, but they're in a high-risk category. The government, in its fascist state of mind, states that they need social distancing as a precautionary measure. It's for their benefit to drag them out of their homes and put them in a FEMA camp. The Ohio Emergency Management Agency is to secure the necessary approvals or to be on the lookout. You need to love this. Just look at this language. Health officials are to be on the lookout for both public and private spaces to be utilized for the FEMA camps. Okay? Football stadiums. Basketball arenas. Okay? Public and private. High schools. College campuses. Nobody's going to school. College campuses. When state officials determine the need to utilize the camps, EMA, that's the Emergency Management Agency of Ohio, is authorized to coordinate with state agencies. State-funded colleges and universities are required to hand over their vacant buildings and grounds for use under the order. Okay? Hand over the dormitories. Is this not fascism, folks? I won't even read the rest of it. It gets me too angry. Raises my blood pressure. You guys can read the rest of it if you want. These are the days, these are the times that we are facing right now. Okay? Okay. Just looking at the chat room. know it's coming to all the areas, all the states. You know, we live in New Hampshire. Their state motto, live free or die, says so when you come across the border, southern border, northern border, eastern, western, you come across the state line, and on the freeways, they have a sign. It says, welcome to New Hampshire. Live free or die state. I have a t-shirt that Kathleen bought me. It's a tourist t-shirt. I wear it proudly. You've seen it on these live streams. New Hampshire. Live free or die state. We will probably be the last state in the union, so to speak. We'll be the last ones going down. We'll be the last ones that they'll set up the FEMA camps in. Kathleen said this in a live stream a long time ago. The people in New Hampshire, and I'm going to just chop this up terribly. Kathleen can say it better than I can. People in New Hampshire are very used to sitting in a tree for 8 or 12 hours with a loaded deer rifle, waiting for the game to come past their tree stand. I'm trying to be politically sensitive with my language. Okay? I'm not going to come right out and say it in public. It's in the chat room. Kathleen's putting it up. There are a lot of hunters in this state, and they're used to sitting waiting for the game. Arkansas, same thing. Mississippi, sounds the same. There are a lot of people in this country that are not going to go down without a fight. I'm not promoting violence and not promoting any form of violence. I'm just saying, people are not going to put up with fascism. Okay? There are not just a lot of hunters in this country, there are a lot of veterans. A lot of veterans are hunters, and a lot of hunters are veterans. I'm a veteran. You guys know that. We're not going to put up with this. Okay? I'm not promoting violence. I'm promoting the fact that we're going to stand up for our rights, our God-given, inalienable, as it says in the Bill of Rights. Inalienable rights given to us by God. We are God's warriors. I'm not saying we're going to go out there and shoot people. I'm not saying that. Okay? I'll probably have my channel taken down just because I'm even talking this way. Okay? But I don't think I'm saying things that other people haven't said on YouTube already. What is the most powerful weapon system on the planet? This is your test for the evening. If you're paying attention. Uh-oh, we're buffering. They're trying to hit the channel. It's buffering. Prayer. Eileen, you get a gold star for the night. Prayer, prayer, prayer. Everybody in here is saying prayer. Prayers. We have several patrons who have asked us to pray for themselves or their loved ones because of health issues, and I'm happy to report that we have received several emails in the last couple of days, especially one gentleman's mother, very elderly, in her 90s, mother's being released from the hospital. She's doing much better. So thank you everyone for your prayers. Please pray for everyone on your list. Pray focused prayers against the fires. As I said at the opening, focused prayers against the governors of the fallen angels who have dominion over the elements. Pray against the fires. Pray against the firestorms. Pray for the health and safety of everyone that is affected. Certainly the smoke being generated, and again, Dutch Sense, great reporting. He is showing the rotation, okay, the counterclockwise rotation of the smoke over California and Oregon, especially in California. Contra-rotating, just like a hurricane does, generating its own weather system, its own cyclonic circulation. This is damaging people's lungs. You can imagine the elderly people, the COPD, the heavy smokers, people who already have respiratory systems that are compromised, having to breathe all of this smoke for days and days and days. Now, I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm trying to be very serious by what I'm about to say. What I'm about to say about the smoke and people with pre-existing respiratory compromise. We can expect to see a spike in COVID numbers. COVID positive numbers and positive COVID death-related, cause of death, COVID numbers out of the West Coast, when in fact it's the smoke. But watch for it. The media will begin to start saying the COVID numbers on the West Coast have spiked higher than any place in the country, but they will not attribute the spike to the smoke. They will just say it's COVID-19. So watch for the spike on the West Coast. Pray against the spike. Pray against the smoke, the fires. Pray for rain. Pray for rain on the West Coast. We here on the East Coast need rain as well, but we need it in moderate amounts. We don't need floods. We don't need hurricanes. We don't need all of that nonsense. Please pray for the appropriate amount of rain for everyone that needs it in the United States and around the world, okay? Because we broadcast around the world. All right, I've held you guys up long enough tonight. We ran an extra 20 minutes. I warned you we would. I thank you for staying late this evening. We covered a lot. I think we got it all. Not that I have to be correct. Yeah, Andy, not too much rain to crash your house again. I agree. I don't need to be correct. That's not my point in sharing the information about particle accelerators, directed energy weapons, kinetic energy weapons as a whole. I don't need to be correct. It's just food for thought. So the last thought I want to share with you is the question, why? Let's be theoretical physicists for a moment. If in fact these are energy weapons being used to start fires, question is why? I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to pose the question for you to think about. Okay? Why would whomever, false flag? Probably. Enemy state? Possibly. Why? I'm looking at the chat room and I agree with what you're posting in chat. I agree. I agree. There's also the number 30. Okay? So complete your thought, J.I. There's 21, but then there's 30. Okay? I would agree, Chris, as well. Chris, what you're saying in there? Absolutely. Okay. And 30. Excellent, excellent. You guys, great researchers, independent thinkers, critical thinkers. Absolutely fantastic. Yep, you're right, J.I. That is their final run. You're right. Silk Road, yes, yes, yes. You can build upon that, Julie. Silk Road, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yep, Kay, you're on it. You got it. What you said, Kay, in the chat room fits with what Julie said just a second ago in the chat room. I'm not reading a lot of these things because I don't want the general public and for YouTube to jump up and down about it. I'm just acknowledging what you guys are saying. Again, I agree with you, Chris. Yep. Yep. All right, so let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Prayers for you all. Thank you all for your friendship and your fellowship. Pay attention to what's going on the West Coast. And follow Dutch's reporting at DutchSense.com and Dutch Sense on YouTube. All right, guys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. God bless you all. Lord willing, we'll be back together on Sunday evening. Good night.